Well, hi everybody, Matt Kloskowski here from the National Association of Photoshop Professionals, and I want to take a quick minute here to thank Brian and all the folks over at On1 Software for having me as a guest appearance here on Perfect Inspiration. So this week I want to take a look at a photo, and I'm going to kind of show you a little bit of the anatomy of the whole photo shoot, because there's some comedic behind the scenes stuff here. But we're going to take a look at a photo that I took during sunset out in San Diego at a place called Sunset Cliffs Beach. And whenever I travel, probably one of the first things that I do is I kind of just do a quick Google search on whatever location that I'm traveling to. And I just put, San Diego photos, and I see what comes up. 500px.com is another website that I go to, and I just type in the location, and sometimes it gives me ideas on where to go out and shoot. San Diego, I found a place called Sunset Cliffs. So if you look on the screen here, here's a couple of photos. You'll notice I bracket everything, meaning I exposure bracket. So you're going to see a lot of overexposed and a lot of underexposed photos as we go through here. But just take a look through. So you'll see here I'm taking a lot of shots of the water coming in, a lot of long exposure stuff. I had a neutral density filter on my camera. And so I'm kind of just going through a couple of different shots here. And then at one point, you're going to see I see a paddleboarder start coming close. And so at this point, I'm like, crap, I want to take my wide angle lens off. Here it is. And I frantically rushed to put my telephoto on. And sadly, like you see all this beautiful light that's over here in front of me, he came across that beautiful light, but I didn't have the right lens on. By the time I got the right lens on, he is now out of the beautiful light, and I'm standing there with a telephoto lens on. And then it gets bad, because you could see a wave starts to come in. And so you could see here everything's good, and then you could see where it gets bad, and then you could see where it gets worse. I didn't drop the camera, it's just I happen to be shooting at the ground. And then I start to shoot again. Here's another place where you see that wave starting to crest back here. You could see it starting to get a little bit closer, and then there we go. We had grabbed the tripod and we run away. All right. So that's just a little bit of behind the scenes on what I was shooting. I kind of settled in on this exposure here. So I'm going to jump over into Lightroom, because that's typically where I'll start. We do have some perspective correction that we need to take care of here. So I'm just going to go down to my lens corrections panel. I always just go to Profile first and click on Enable Profile Corrections. Take a look at what it does. See how it fixes some of that curvature on the edges? All right. Then I'm going to go over to Manual, and I do need to tweak this a little bit. I'm going to rotate it around to kind of straighten that horizon line. And then I'm just going to go to my distortion, and it's still a little bit curved, so we're going to see if we can fix that up a little bit. All right, so that's looking pretty good. We'll come back up here to the basic panel. I was kind of going with a warmer type of a feeling here, so our white balance. Exposure, it's hard to choose exposure, because if I take exposure to the left, or if I exposed less in camera, that my foreground's almost black. If I exposed any more to the right, then the foreground looks good, but the sky's blowing out. So we're going to leave that for now, and we'll tweak the highlights to bring down the sky, and we'll tweak the shadows to open up some of the foreground. Okay, now I'll add a little bit of contrast to it here. I always do a little trick. I hold down the Option key on Mac, Alt on PC. I drag my white slider until everything goes black when I hold down Option or Alt, and I just drag that slider until I start to see something, and I dial back a little bit. And then same thing, drag the black slider to the left, and that gives me a good black and white point. But at this point, there's not too much more that I would do to it in Lightroom other than grab my graduated filter. I would take the highlights down here to the left a little bit, and then just drag down from the top, just to try to darken that sky just a little bit more, some of the bright parts in it. And while we're here, we can go grab our spot healing or our spot removal tool. And there's just a couple of spots up here in the sky. And we'll just go in there and just click on them, and that'll get rid of them. All right, we could always do this in Photoshop later, but heck, we're here inside of Lightroom. We might as well take advantage of it while we have it here. I kind of just look through the sky, make sure there's no spots that are up there. All right, one more over here, and I think we're about done. Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna jump over into Photoshop. And a lot of people ask, when I use plugins, do I use the Lightroom version of the plugin or do I use the Photoshop version? For me, most of the time, I use the Photoshop version because I know I'm gonna be in Photoshop anyway. I'm gonna do a little bit of retouching, whatever it happens to be. So I'd rather just use the plugin from there. So we'll go Photo, Edit in, Photoshop CS6. And it's gonna take a copy of this photo. It's gonna jump us over into Photoshop. And from here, I'll do a little bit more when it comes to any of those little retouching things that I talked to you about. I take the spot healing brush here, and if there is anything that's larger in the sky that I want to get rid of, I can go ahead and touch it up there. Are there any little spots or anything like that in the foreground? Like there's a little bit of weird looking foam in the water up here that I can click on. Any little things that might be part of the photo but still kind of look like spots, so I'll go ahead and get rid of those. But I think we're good. Oh, there's a little spot on the rock here I'm not crazy about. And then one right up at the top. So once I get any little retouching tasks that I have done, then I'm ready to just apply some finishing effects to it. And I always use Perfect Effects for that. So we'll hop over here, I'll go File, we'll come down here to Automate, and I'm gonna go to Perfect Effects 4. So it's gonna launch Photo Suite 7 for me and open up Perfect Effects 4. And this is kind of the finishing touches for me. This is where I do all those little effects that I know I could do sometimes in Photoshop, but they take me 3 or 4 different layers and blend modes and all these different things. I can get done a lot faster here inside of Perfect Effects. So the first thing that we'll do is I will jump down to contrast. And there's a lot of great little contrast filters inside of here. So I'm gonna go to, let's try dark contrast. And I like dark contrast. I like if I turn it on and off, you can see it here. That's before. That's after. I like what dark contrast did. It kind of made the sky a little bit hot. So I'm just gonna take my perfect brush here and I'll turn on the perfect brush. What it does, what the difference is the perfect brush is just a brush and I can brush. If I turn on perfect brush, I can go in there and it takes out, it keeps me from having to worry about kind of going over into the water here. So I can go straight along the horizon line. Once I get that part, I'll usually turn it off because it's a little faster without it. But I'll just brush in the original sky. Just like that. And then I'm gonna go over here, I'm gonna click Add, and we'll go over to our effects. I'll turn that one off, and we'll go over here into color correction. There's a couple of different color effects that we can have here. I kind of wanna go with a little bit more of a blue / magenta type of a look. So I'm gonna click on increase color, and that's overall gonna increase the color here. I will dial that down because it comes in on a layer. I'll hit add one more time, and there's one more effect that I like to apply on my landscapes, and that happens to be in the landscape folder. So we'll click on landscape, and now you can get a lot of different feels for all the different colors we can add to this here as I scroll down through. Okay. And I'm thinking we'll go with Magic Ocean. I kind of like that one. And again, it has an amount setting here, so I always just reduce it a little bit. It's kind of like reducing the opacity on a layer. And if it does happen to look a little bit too hot up here in the sky, then just go grab your brush and you can just go and paint it right out, just like we did the other effect before. One of my favorite finishing touches is tonal contrast. It's a filter that you'll find in a lot of filter or plugin suites. I don't know what tonal contrast does, but it just adds this contrast that I can't ever seem to get anywhere else. So that's over here inside of the contrast section. And you'll see especially what it does to the rocks. Check it out. So it makes everything, it kind of gives everything this overall gritty type of a feel. Now, I don't want that grit. I love it in the rocks up front. I'm going to reduce the amount because it's a little bit too much anyway. But I love it in the rocks up front. I don't like water and I don't like skies when they get this effect. So again, that's when I come over here and I take the brush and I just paint it out of the water and the sky. Because to me, the water and the sky should have more of a smooth, kind of just a softer look to me. But I'm okay if the rocks and everything up front tend to get that more kind of gritty edgy type of a feel to it. So I love that effect. And then we'll finish this off, and it's one of my favorites. In fact, it's under my favorites. It's called Big Softy. And it adds a soft gradient all the way around, or soft darkening gradient all the way around the edges. And again, I just reduce the opacity a little bit here and paint it out of the sky. Okay, because it just makes it a little bit too dark up there. All right. And when we're done here, we just click Apply. And this is going to bring us right back over into Photoshop. And I could still do, well, once I get back over to Photoshop, I could still do all the Photoshop-like things that I do to my photos. I could go back in, I can retouch. I can do anything that I could normally do inside of Photoshop because it's still a regular Photoshop document at this point. All right, and here we are. And you can see the changes. That was before we went into Perfect Effects, and that's after. So before, and then after. Now, I'm going to take this one tiny step further. This is totally optional, purely artistic thing to do, but it kind of works for this photo. So take a look. It's a longer exposure, but it's not long enough to make the clouds streaky or the water to have that too smooth of a feeling here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a selection up here of the sky. I'm going to press Command or Control J, put it onto a new layer. All right. I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, and I'm going to go to Radial Blur. I change the blur method to zoom, change the amount to about 50, and then you can move it up and down. So I'm going to kind of move it to the top left here. I'm going to click OK. Watch what this does. It kind of gives the clouds that streaky type of a blur feeling. I guess it's like a long exposure blur. Now I think I probably went a little bit too high on this one, so I'm going to undo. Let's go back into it. Let's knock that in half. Let's go down here about 25. There we go. Take a look. That's before. That's after. See how it smooths out some of the clouds there? So purely artistic, just kind of a fun little thing to do. And if you really want to get creative, you could take your quick selection tool and you could go here and you could just drag over the water. Again, definitely that next level here. I duplicate it onto its own layer and we'll go to Filter and we're going to go to Blur. Once again, I'm going to go to Motion Blur. All right, and I'm going to increase my distance here until the water gets all streaky smooth. Hit OK, and look at what it does to the water. Now, that might be too much before, after, but then you just reduce your opacity. And so now you start to get more of that really super long exposure, like if it were a 60 or 90 second exposure, you start to get more of that look. All right, at this point, I'm just going to hit File, Save. It's going to take us back over here into Lightroom, and I'll show you the before and after. But the whole round trip of the whole thing. We start off inside of Lightroom. That's where I do pretty much all of my exposure adjustments, all of my contrast, anything like that. Then I move over into Photoshop. I do any retouching or anything like that, and then I kind of finish things off with any effects or any vignettes, anything like that that I kind of just want to just apply to the photo right at the end. So let's take a look here. You can see there's our final image. I'll go back to the before image here, and I'll hit the reset button. So that's before, right, before any adjustments, and that's after. So once again, before, after. Okay, folks, hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much once again to Brian and everyone over at ON1 Software for A, letting me jump on and commandeer a whole week of perfect inspiration, and B, for making some very cool products for us to use here. My name is Matt Kloskowski. Hope to talk to you again very soon.